Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and hello people. We are from group 7, and in this video we are going to continue the explanation or the presentation of previous group, which is the talk about universal grammar and first language acquisition, what consists on a theory and etc. Meanwhile, in our material, we are going to explain about universal grammar and second language acquisition and universal grammar-based approach to second language acquisition. Hi, I'm A.Yuliani.Ap and I'm going to talk about universal grammar and second language acquisition. What universal grammar is? According to Wikipedia.com, universal grammar is usually developed by Noam Chomsky, which suggests that linguistic ability manifests itself without being taught, and then there are properties that all natural human languages shape. Therefore, the universal grammar theory indicates that language learning involves innateness. It's a matter of observation and experimentation to determine precisely what abilities are innate and what properties are language shaped by languages. Alright, I'll talk a little bit about a brief description of universal grammar, which is about the difference between first language acquisition and second language acquisition process. Unlike first language acquisition, which is natural and unconscious, second language acquisition is conscious. In real life, it is still that children acquire their first language without explicit learning. As we know, children usually pick up the commonly spoken language as their native language. For instance, the Indonesian children listen and interact with their parents using Indonesian language every day. Not only that, the Indonesian language which they learn is the tool to satisfy their needs. For example, the parents would give the children food when the children tell them that they are hungry. Here the language does this role effectively where both children and parents understand the Indonesian language. No formal learning lesson is taking place for that to pick up the native language. This is aligned with Chomsky's theory that language doesn't need to be learned but acquired subconsciously. According to the Chinese linguist Zhang, second language learners are cognitive mature as they already know at least one language and they have different motivation for learning second language. That is to say, what makes first language acquisition different from second language acquisition is the fact that second language learners begin the second language learning with a well-formed first language acquisition with language acquisition system and a more mature cognitive capacity and an advanced learning mechanism. Question 2 distinguishes first language learning from second language learning to observe first language learning as involving acquisition and second language learning as based on learning. One of the major hypotheses that indicates the different modes of acquisition between first language acquisition and second language acquisition is the fundamental difference hypothesis by Blay-Veroma. And according to hypothesis, nature of the process involved in second language acquisition is radically different from primary language acquisition. Whereas the formal process involved a language-specific recounting the LAD. The latter observes a more general problem-solving skill. The fundamental hypothesis also claims that second language learners don't have access to universal grammar, but instead fully accessible in first language. Therefore, their language universal is supposedly constructed through the mother tongue, which mediates knowledge of universal grammar. Hence, second language acquisition will rarely or never achieve a native-like proficiency. This hypothesis also sees polarization, which is when the learner gets stopped and doesn't go beyond a certain level of language knowledge as one of the main factors that we need second language learners' competence. In other words, it's very hard for the second language acquisition to be proficient in English in four aspects, which are speaking, listening, writing, and reading.
Hi, I'm Vinasti Yusri and I want to continue material from Miss A.Yuliani.Ap about principles and parameters. Universal grammar is a set of principles that are the properties of all language. So Chomsky believes that all languages have this very core principle and it's called universal grammar. And this principle have parameters that limit the choice of the data depending on the language involved. I'm gonna explain later with example. Children are believed to have the innate ability to understand all principles and parameters subconsciously. They don't have to consciously learn these principles and parameters. And the last one is that Chomsky proposed that UG is the reason why children never violate the principle and never select wrong parameters. Okay, now I'm going to talk about one of the examples of the principle that Chomsky talked about. So we have here the principle of the elements including heat. So what does heat mean? Okay, for example, he believed that in all language, for example, per phrase. In per phrase, you have to have the heat for example, in per phrase word heart. You have the heat per word before the complement heart, but word heart is one phrase. So this is one of the principles that Chomsky stated in his universal grammar. Theory that every language always have in the phrase what he calls as the head noun phrase has to have a non-head verb phrase has to have a verb head. So now we all know that language are different. The rules of language are all different. Like well, there are some similarity, but there are also a lot of difference. Now, what is the parameters? One example of the parameters is the position or direction of the head. He only recognize head initial and also head final. Okay, let's take a look at the example here with the comparison between English also French. Okay, say for example in English there's sentence she called you. As you can see here, the verb phrase called you. Okay, the verb comes first and then you because the first comes first before the object or the head. Come first, this is called head initial. Let's take a look at the comparison with French. It's actually meaning the same elle, t'appelle. Okay, we have the verb phrase here, t'appelle, but actually the verb is appelle and ta. Here from ta is you. So the object comes first before the verb. That means the head first comes last or later. Okay, this is what is called as the head final. Okay, that's enough for me. Let's move to the next speaker. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Lilis Wahyuni and I will explain about UG Based Approach to SLA atau pendekatan tata bahasa untuk akuisisi bahasa kedua. UG is an established language concept which has become deeply embedded in many areas of linguistic research, including second language acquisition research. Jadi tata bahasa atau UG ini adalah konsep bahasa yang mapan yang telah sangat melekat di banyak bidang penelitian linguistik, juga di penelitian akuisisi bahasa. The scope of achievement of the UG. It is important to remember that in this section, UG is a concept whose purpose is to describe and explain human language. The acquisition of a second language is relevant to the study of a second language, which is considered a natural language, where the acquisition of a second language to understand the interlanguage system and understand what limits the language system. Therefore, UG has a wide scope. Jadi penting untuk diingat bahwa di bagian ini UG adalah konsep yang memiliki tujuan untuk menjelaskan bahasa manusia. Dengan demikian, akuisisi bahasa kedua signifikan dengan studi bahasa kedua yang dianggap sebagai bahasa alami, di mana akuisisi bahasa kedua untuk memahami sistem bahasa dan memahami apa yang membatasi sistem bahasa. And the next is the UG view of language. The UG view of language has been influential since the 1950. The UG approach view language as a mental framework which underlines all human language. Thus, it has a focus on aspect of language and nothing else. Jadi tampilan bahasa UG, pandangan tata bahasa UG, tata bahasa tentang bahasa telah sangat pendekatan tata bahasa UG memandang bahasa sebagai konsep mental yang melandasi semua bahasa manusia. Dengan demikian, ini memiliki fokus pada aspek bahasa dan bukan yang lain. Tata bahasa ini hanya memiliki kaitan dengan kalimat dan tata bahasanya. Mungkin itu saja yang dapat saya jelaskan. And the next will continue my friend.
And I will explain my matter about the universal grammar view of language acquisition, atau pandangan tata bahasa dari pemerolehan bahasa. And second material, the universal grammar view of the language learner, atau pandangan tata bahasa universal dari bahasa pelajar. The first, I will explain about the universal grammar view of language acquisition. Universal grammar is exclusively concerned with documenting and explaining the nature of the language system of second languages. Social and psychological variables that affect the speed of the learning process are beyond their roots and are therefore lectured. The universal grammatical approach to second language acquisition research is very influential and useful and has resulted in numerous studies that have greatly improved our understanding of second language development. And the second material, the universal grammar view of language learner. Universal grammatical approach is only interested in the learners as the owner of the mind that contains the language. The assumption is that all humans are endowed with such a thought, and that comparison between individuals are of little connect to universal language theory. I think now I'm back to the moderator.
Now, lastly, to conclude this video, I would like to connect the universal grammar and second language acquisition. So, how does this connect to second language acquisition? Because that's the point of our learning this theory. To understand how this is connected to second language acquisition, so the existence of universal grammar is very important in the history of second language acquisition and learning theory in the teaching and learning of second language, because it actually become the trigger of the foundation of three questions. The first question is about the initial state. The question that still stays until now and it's not answered yet is that do second language learners also have innate capacity or the language faculty when they start learning second language in their life? Okay, that's the first. And the second question is about the nature of interlanguage. What about the process of a second language learner? Is the interlanguage the same as child grammar, and then before start to did the study about morpheme or the studies and they found about natural order? This is the concept that is surrounding the interlanguage or the process from a first language acquisition to second language acquisition. And this is also started from universal grammar. And the last question is about the final state of second language acquisition. What is actually the final state of second language acquisition? Can someone who learns second language become like native or have the native ability? The question still exists and it still remains a subject of research. Alright, that's all of our explanation. We hope you guys understand and could take a lesson from it. Thank you and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.